in that moment, I was thinking about, yes, me professionally, but the thing that I was very happy with, if that was my last breath, was what we'd achieved in the legacy, which is Mabel Park State High School.
Hi, welcome to the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel. I'm your host, Tarun Stevenson, and we are all about helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite podcasting app, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you can stay up to date with all our latest episodes. All right, here's the latest episode. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Tarun here, and I'm here with my good friend Mick Hornby, who is the principal of Mabel Park State High School. I've had the privilege of working with him in the past. I highly respect this man as a leader, and he's got an incredible story of turning around his school, Mabel Park High School, which I want to really dig into today. Welcome, Mick, to the show.
Thank you, Tarun.
It's good to have you, and good to catch up. It's been a little while.
It has. You're a good man. You're a busy man as always, but yeah, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the time out, because I know how busy you are doing your masters and running a widely popular school that you are now. But why don't we start right at the beginning? I kind of met you at the beginning of your journey at Mabel Park. I joined the team probably around the same time as you did. It was about 6 years ago, and at the time the school was, if you like, it was in a decline mode. It probably wasn't at the peak that it had been in the past. There was probably only about 543 students. It had a negative perception in the community. And what were your initial thoughts as you came into that kind of environment as a leader? What are you thinking when you see the challenges that you're facing, and what's the process that you go through to start moving forward from there?
Yeah, Tarun, that's a really good start. Look, when I arrived at Mabel, I, with all honesty, had come from, was a deputy principal for 5 years at Ipswich State High School, and it was a great school to learn. But I knew I wanted to be a principal, so had applied for a couple of jobs and missed out. So for all those leaders out there, you do not take no for your first answer. And then as it would have it, I ended up getting an acting stint here at Mabel, and I walked in the door thinking in my head that my first school would be about getting in and there'd be all these things to clean up and you know, things that were going pear-shaped, but it wasn't that. What I found was actually the students were great, the staff were very compliant, but what I always did, and what I did, was save the landscape. And I always say you've got to go slow to go quick. So what I did is made sure I had lots of conversations with people. I, you know, with those conversations, I would make sure I would get to the classrooms, get to the playground duties, speak to the students, and made sure my judgments were made off a range of different sources. And what I found in that, after surveying the landscape, was I just don't think there was definitely the compliance. They were turning up, but they didn't. It wasn't the engagement, and I don't believe that the school at that point in time was able to put on a school for students. It was a general normal school. They were just plodding along. That had some issues with perception when I got here. So for me, it was about seeing strengths and really harnessing those strengths that I could see, but also making sure that staff knew that we just didn't have to be a school in Logan, that we could actually, if we really wanted to, we could push some boundaries. And once, it took me about 6 months, and after 6 months, that's when we could really get some traction. Probably the biggest step, if I think about it, was to ask staff what they thought the school stood for, to create, and I know it's probably in literature, but and the fact that I thought it would run for 3 weeks, and it ended up, the process ran for nearly 6 months. And I knew we were onto something when my cleaners were coming into my room and crossing off words, saying, actually, we don't stand for that, and I don't like that word. And it got to a point the vision and the mission statement was great, but it actually wasn't as meaningful as the process behind it. That staff really were committed to that vision. They wanted to be a great school. And I think it's the first time they had buy-in into that. And that I think started our journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would say that that's one of the things I've always admired about you is you always, when I worked with you, always took time to really listen to staff, no matter who they were in the school organisation, whether they were the cleaner, whether they were a head of department or a classroom teacher. You always took time to meaningfully listen to the feedback of the people you're working with. And I think that that was probably one of your biggest strengths when I worked with you and watching you do that. I want to dig more into how you manage teams through cultural change, because that's a big one, I think, and you've gone through significant cultural change. But I just want to unpack a little bit. When you first started there, you said that you were on a short-term contract. You didn't know that you were going to remain at that school, as is sometimes the case with the education system. You come for a short stint. But one of the things probably the first impression I had of you is you didn't lead like somebody who was just a temporary caretaker. You led as if it was your school and you were there for the long haul. What gave you the impetus to actually lead in that way? You could have just been in caretaker mode and waited for your next posting, but you chose to actually be intentional, even if you didn't know whether you were going to be back again.
Varun, it's a brilliant question. What happened was I only got a term contract. So in school then that's 10 weeks. So I got 10 weeks. It was at the end of those 10 weeks that I reflected on myself and what I was doing. And I was offered another 10 weeks in the school, so another term on the last day of that contract, if you want to call it that. And I really reflected and said to myself, I don't know if I was making decisions that were long term. And so I said at that end of that 10 weeks, regardless of whether the other principal comes back or not, I'm going to lead this school how I'd lead if I was leading it for 5 years. And that was a bit of a mindset change that I had to tell myself. I had to say, look, in the end, I think I got extended for 10 weeks 4 times before I actually got to go for the job permanently. But I had to change my mindset, and it wasn't smooth sailing. It wasn't as soon as I walked in the door, I said that, but it took me a term to go, hang on. I don't know if I was making firm decisions, and I had to say to myself, right, from now on, every decision that I make is going to be as if I'm here for 5 years. And the reason why I made that choice was I didn't want people to see me in my leadership realm not fulfilling my potential or not standing for what I believed in because I thought someone else was going to come back or I wouldn't be here in 5 weeks. So it was one of those things that you have to say to yourself in your mind. And once I made that decision, then it was easy. Then I could think about long-term views and how do we do it and making sure we're looking after students. So yes, I had to switch there after 10 weeks and make that call.
Great. And once you made that decision for yourself, what did you do to start getting the buy-in of your staff? Because I mean, teachers can tend to be a little bit skeptical of the new guy that comes in. They tend to get a lot of principal changes. They've seen short-term principals come and try and change their school overnight. So sometimes they can be really resistant to any kind of movement forward. What was your process for getting to know the staff, helping to reassure them that even if you were there a short time, that the way you were leading was actually good in the long run?
Yeah, I think it's both the informal and the formal conversations. So the informal conversations were the day I arrived, going to staff rooms early in the morning and making sure that I could meet one-on-one. I had quite a few names to try and remember and people, and I thought, that's my personality. Let's just go out there and meet people and having conversations and how'd you go on holiday and introducing myself. And I always find too, trying to find a connection point, trying to find some sort of commonality and getting to know people. So informally, and then the formal stuff was making sure they knew what I stood for, making sure that they knew that I was, I am a father of 4 young children. that I do wear different hats, that I turn up every day. I wear my teacher hat. I explain that I wear my father hat. So when I'm have incidents happen, I make sure that I put myself in that if that's my son, what would I expect from the school? And also the new principal hat, that I did have to wear that hat. And sometimes decisions were not going to be something that was great for that teacher or whatever, but I had to reiterate that. And then I think with that formal communication was making sure I set up vehicles in which I could listen and get information. And I think that was came across as something that staff loved, that I would set up structures in meetings where I could ask them opinions and they could give me those opinions, because I always say that the best ideas generally come from the floor. They definitely come from people that are doing the job. So that initial stages, I think, were the things that helped me buy credibility at the start of my journey.
That's great. That's great. And so, I mean, in any cultural change process, you've always got a bell curve of buy-in, if you like. You've got your early adopters. You've got the people that probably would have bought into you in the first 6 months just because you're a likable guy. But how did you approach perhaps the staff that were a little bit more suspicious, a little bit more reluctant to go on the journey with you? Because that can, for leaders, often be the challenge of it's the reluctant staff that we struggle to lead well. What's the process for winning their confidence and getting their influence buy-in?
Yeah, I think, Tarun, here, the interesting thing was it didn't have a good reputation, but there were lots of long-term staff members here, really embedded. We're talking, I would suggest maybe 60% of staff were here for 20 years, which is a long time. And I think you're right. They'd seen a number of leaders come through the school, and they were definitely standoffish. They were definitely, who is this guy? And he'll be another one that floats through the system. So it was about connecting with them. It was making sure that I was authentic and that whatever I said, I did, no matter what, whether it was I'll email you afterwards, or I'll follow up that phone call, or whatever it was. Those small opportunities, if we want to call them, the small opportunities to follow up always build your credibility, and then you can do you can institute the bigger change. And so when we got to a point, I think I was about 3 terms, so nearly just past 6 months, when I flagged that I thought the framework, so that's a big thing in a school, the pedagogical framework. I had to judge whether I had the credibility and the influence, whether I could pull that off. And I was very fortunate that I'd had those informal conversations. Staff knew that I wasn't just here to get data to go to the next job, that I truly said what I meant, and they knew that I was authentic, that when I broached that I thought we needed to change it, I think they listened, and then that's how we could actually change it. And it's a big structural change in the school to do that. So that's when I knew that I'd built the credibility, that we could do something like this that I'd not seen done in another school.
Great. And I was at the school when you made that big switch to the Mazzano framework for pedagogy, and that was probably about a year into your leadership. What was the process that you went through when you were judging whether you had enough buy-in beyond the informal conversations? How do you know that you're not just getting lip service? Because our people don't always tell us the truth when we ask them how they are. Sometimes they just tell us they're okay when they're not. How do you dig beneath that and figure out where you're really at?
Again, that's a tough one. I think it's a number of things. I used to put myself out there. I talked about feedback being important for students and for teachers. So if you're going to talk about something that's important, then you need to put yourself out there. So I put myself out there with 360-degree feedback, where it was confidential. I'd ask them to sort of give me their feedback and set it up in a time-efficient manner. I think that helped because they could see that They could tell me anything they wanted, and I'd take that feedback. So that helped. That the surveying the landscape, it's an interesting one when you say that, but that's what I was doing. And you're surveying it with everything you've got. It's people talk about data. Yes, you're looking at data, but I think the teachers in the classroom, the conversations, watching the faculty meetings, and you're spoiling the money, Tarun. What I found when I got here, there was lots of compliance, but I struggled to see the commitment. So there was lots of compliance, but I didn't see the commitment. And I think once we did the initial vision and mission, where we talked about what we wanted, once they saw that I listened to what staff had said and we actually put that in words and then publicised it across the school, I think that then helped to lead into the next, where they said, well, actually, maybe he does listen to us, and I think that brought credibility. And once that was bought, we all know credibility buys you influence, and I think that's when I could influence that conversation, and I could influence it through strategically asking questions around, do we use, the current or the old pedagogical framework? And when they knew that they were safe to answer in a way that was truthful, as in, no, we don't use that model anymore, or I don't know how to use it, or, once we identified that they could trust me, they could bring up something and I wasn't going to berate them, I think that's when traction was made. And then it was an easy sell, because once I could get the influence and say, look, I actually think we're not using this. Once they told me, yes, we're not using this, we're just doing lip service to it, then it was easy to get them over the line. And then when I say easy, but I couldn't just then throw them the next one and say, well, let's just do this pedagogical framework. It was more the change management what I did is I said, well, I actually went to the top. I went to the head of the Mazzano Institute in Australia and said, I want to hire you and get you to the school. Instead of sending my people outside of the school in groups, I want you to come here. So by doing that, also in that change management structure, by having real conversations with them, by, talking about why we should do it, by actually investing and saying, well, I think it's so important that I've got the head of the Mazzano Institute to come to the school and speak to you as a school cohort. I think that also allowed staff to say, well, Mick believes in it, and not only does he believe in it, he's actually invested in it. And I think it wasn't haphazard. It was a very clean process where staff knew that I wanted to do it, and that it was for students. That was critical, that I had to communicate why I thought we needed to do it.
It's great. Yeah. So when you were rolling out this change, what sort of process did you use? Did you use the rumor mill, or did you target key influencers, or was it just one announcement, everybody heard it at the same time, and you just mopped up afterwards? What sort of approach did you take when you rolled it out?
Yeah, any big change management process, I always, as best I can, in the most time efficient, time is critical, is I try and get to individual people first. And the reason why I do that, because I always think, don't front a group of people where you don't know whether they're on board or not. Know who's on board and know who's not on board, so that you know your audience before you even talk. So individually, conversations, discussing the why, discussing why I thought it was important, ask for their opinion. What do you think? By the time I got to the whole leadership team, that it was fairly cemented that everyone thought that we needed to change. I knew I wanted to do Mazzano because I'd previously seen it done and done well. But again, after we got to the leadership team, everyone agreed that we needed a new PED framework, having individual conversations with senior staff members, and then asking for their opinion in a group setting, getting that opinion, saying, look, I'm looking at the data here. You've told me we think we should change it, and then giving back to them some. I listened to those options. So it was great to hear. And you are, maybe the question is, well, hang on, Mick, what if they said they wanted to do a different PED framework? Would you have done it? If I had 90% of staff that wanted to do a different framework, I would have done it. because
Sure.
that's better having 90% that are committed to a different framework than me deciding and thinking it's the best for the school. So
Yeah.
yeah, once we did that, once I got to them individually, whole staff, it was like they were hearing it anyway, and then they were committed and they were keen to start something new. And I think again that was another key milestone in the change at Mabel, which led us to getting some momentum.
That's awesome. So sometimes your influencers are not your leaders. How how did you identify the influencers in your team that perhaps didn't hold official leadership positions, but you knew they had sway over the wider group? How are you looking out for those people, and what are the methods that you use to approach them to bring them on side and help you in the process?
Yeah, I think you're spot on the money, Tarun. There's lots of key influences that will not hold job titles, but I think maybe it's naivety, maybe
Mm,
it's just getting to people and just having conversations with them. But I thought that built trust when I was having conversations with staff members, and I actually didn't care what. Yeah, I did care what they thought, but I was just after who they were. I just wanted to have a
sure,
chat. I love
sure.
talking to people. I love stories. I love hearing stories. So I think by doing that naturally, it then it then allowed me, by doing it naturally, I then was surveying the landscape and not really knowing. I was picking
Yeah,
up gut feeling, thinking, well, hang on, there's this teacher over here. She's been 20 years and she actually is telling me things about the school that I don't know about.
yeah,
And you know, to hear the teacher that again has been here for 25 years, and um, once you figure out, geez, you've got some really good people here, it's about building on their strengths.
great.
And I think that's what we did. That's what we did when we entered that. When I entered a conversation and introduced myself, there's that trust that goes both ways. Once they figured out that this isn't just a guy that's ringing in to get another job somewhere else,
Mm,
that's when they would trust me, and they would tell me different aspects about the school. And it was important in that moment when they'd tell me things that they thought weren't working well, that you identified that you had to listen to that. You didn't have to necessarily do anything about it that you want to all the time, but
mm,
um, it was about listening, taking that on board, and making sure they knew that you had listened and that
yeah,
you were taking that into consideration. So,
great.
yeah, lots of brilliant staff here, but I just don't know if they'd their resources we tapped the best out of them. And I think
Yeah,
by doing that, naturally, key people started to rise to the top, and that's when I started to figure out who was actually influential. But luckily, yeah, great people here, and very easy to lead when you've got great people around you. So I was just, I always say I'm very lucky, and people pull me up. No, you're not. You've done the hard work, but I do truly
yeah.
feel lucky to have been blessed with so many great people around me that were already here, and others that have been able to jump on board as we've got
Mm.
momentum. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. So tell me your mission and vision. I vaguely remember it. It's been a little bit of time since I've been there, but tell me again, what's your mission and vision?
I, I, I I'm going to look it up because I've been on holidays. Tarun, can you still see me while I'm
I
while
can
I'm
still
playing
see
around
you.
with my while I'm playing around with my computer? But the mission, oh sorry, the vision is to be the most respected, admired, and accomplished school.
Yep.
So that was a really big one because everyone didn't like the admired bit. They
Yep.
thought that was a bit snobbish.
Yep.
The mission that we deliver outstanding education to our students and enrich our community.
Yep.
Um, and then the big ones that I loved was we ended up with core values: students first, respect for all, holistic well-being, and continuous improvement and innovation. So, look, the best thing for me as a new principal was when they come up with the students first bit.
Yep.
For me, that was brilliant because there were decisions that had to be made that people weren't happy with.
Yeah.
There's always decisions in school. If a student is playing up in a class and a teacher's over them, and and you know the backstory of that student, and you sort of, the teacher might demand that they be suspended. And I was able to use that core value and say, well, hang on, does it actually put the student first?
Great.
And once I could lean on that, something that they'd created, that allowed me to make decisions that were tough.
Yeah.
But I think then the staff knew why I was making those tough decisions.
That's good. So go back to your mission. You said to be the most respected and admired school. I mean, that's a really ambitious statement to make. And you said that not everybody liked that sort of, sounded a little bit arrogant, maybe up yourself a bit. What's the process? Because when you make statements like that, they're aspirational statements. You understand that that's where you want to move towards. But I mean, I guess in some way, every school wants to be admired, or every leader wants their organization to be admired. What made you land on such an ambitious mission statement, if you like?
Because the issue for me, we had lots of statements coming through where teachers and staff wanted to be the best school in Logan. And I said, I'm not limiting it to Logan. Then they said, well, let's be the best school in Queensland. And I said, again, I'm not limiting it to that, and Australia. And I just thought, by putting a cap on our capability, it didn't allow us to do whatever we wanted. Like I just, and for me, I honestly wanted to push the system. I walked into this job. My background is, I was born in a country town called Narrandera with parents that, from low socioeconomic, background. I never wanted to be a principal. And then I become one, and my mindset changes to, why can't we do this? Why can't we do things that are different for kids? And so I suppose that was reflected in my belief around that mission statement, that why should we limit our capability when, if it's really open-ended, it's really aspirational, then it allows us to lean back on that every time we think we're going to get in comfort mode. Every time we accomplish an award, it makes us then go, right, that was great. What's the next step? How are we going to move to the next stage? It doesn't, by capping it, I think you limit yourself. So it was hugely aspirational, particularly for a little school in Logan that was not well respected. But again, any of the words matter. They matter a lot, but they didn't matter as much as the staff who had actually created those words. So it didn't matter whether that admired or not was there. It was great when the argument started around it. Like it actually, I shut the room on the last day of the school term because it had gone for so long, and said, right, we're not leaving this room until we decide. And there was actually fierce conversations around why admired should be there and shouldn't. And I'm sitting back at this stage going, this is brilliant. I couldn't have asked for this to go as well as it did. And so, yes, it's very aspirational, but not as powerful as the 100 back then. It was about 110 people in the school, staff members that owned it. So
that's great. So you believe that process really helped with the buy-in and the engagement of your staff once you rolled it out, because they had been part of that conversation. They really owned it once it was decided on.
Yeah, and now it was like a foundation block. We could then lean back on it if we were going off track, or when I had to have tough conversations with all staff around whether it's finance or funding or whatever it was, we could actually lean back on that and say, well, does this align to our vision and mission? Remember, we all did it. Remember, we all had that say. It took us all that time, and it got to a point we just wanted it to finish. And if it does align, we do it. And if it doesn't, well, then that's when we push it to the side. So, yeah, it definitely was a foundation block to start building a really strong culture, a team culture, and then we could start to do the innovative stuff or the a little bit of risk taking in regards to what we did in the school.
That's awesome. And I don't want to brush past the achievements that you have had. I mean, in 6 years, you've gone from a school of 540 students to over 1,400 students. You're winning awards all over the place. This year, you've got more teachers being nominated for the Queensland College of Teachers Awards than any other school in Queensland. So you really have shifted the culture and the perception of people outside of your school to one where you're not just another school in a low socioeconomic area, but you're really doing some groundbreaking stuff and you're innovating in so many places. How does it feel? I know, because I've worked with you for quite a while and I've watched you for such a long time, you're very self-effacing. You don't like to take the accolade for yourself. You very much share the credit with your team. But how does it feel when you have those moments where you look back on the journey that you've been on and other people are saying, hey, I recognize that what you aspired to 6 years ago is now a reality? How do you process that as a leader without letting it go to your head or, becoming too arrogant?
Tarun, I'm going to share with you a little story that recently happened to me, and at the end, I'm going to tell you where that sort of thought got to. So, I was on camping at in an island called Moreton Island, which is just off the Brisbane coast, very remote. And I was over there. This is my 6th year. I was over there camping with my 4 young kids, and we had an incident where there's lots of background to the story, where we had a few incidents before that. And the wind had got up, and I was away from the main camp, and I heard the screams, and this little tinny that my late grandfather had given me, and it'd never seen salt water. I'd only used it on the Murrumbidgee, and I'd only brought it for the first time, bought the little motor, and it had broken from its rope and was floating out to sea. And in that moment, I quickly got a kayak, and there was a family friend kayaking after it. My 2 daughters were swimming out to it, and my son with a little paddleboard. So I get about 100 meters out to sea, and my daughters had swum that far. They're only 11 and 10, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, get on this kayak and get back to the beach. And my son was there, and I start swimming after it. We end up about 700 meters out to sea, a long way. We're getting big waves now. The tinny's still going. And I was wearing an Are You OK shirt, bright yellow. And I'm wearing this shirt, and my son says, Dad, you told me, he's only 9. Dad, you told me how to start it. I reckon I could get there. And Laura, by this time, had found it, but couldn't start it. I said, right, Tom, go for it. So he goes through it, and I can tell they can't start it. It's still 50 meters away and getting further and further. In that moment, I took on some water. I worried about what was happening and what was about to happen to me. I laid there with my Are You OK shirt and said, I'm just going to float because I can't swim anymore. And lots of thoughts went through my mind. And one of the thoughts was, am I happy with what I've achieved in my professional life right now? And the thought about Mabel and where we are, and going back to what you said around, I didn't think in that moment, I was thinking about, yes, me professionally, but the thing that I was very happy with, if that was my last breath, was what we'd achieved in the legacy, which is Mabel Park State High School, that we have done something that I think leaves a massive legacy across our system, whether it's the health hub that hadn't been done before, or the GP in a high school that hadn't been done before. And in that moment, I really reflected on what I'd achieved professionally, and the thing that really jumped out to me, that I was extremely proud of the team that we'd built. And it doesn't come from new buildings or resources or whatever. It comes from people. And I was just in that moment where I was a little bit worried about whether I was, by the end of it, we ended up a kilometre out to sea, and all ended well. I'm here, but this is only last week. And just in that moment, there was 1,000 thoughts that went through my head. And one of them was around Mabel and here and my professional career. And if that was the end of it, I was extremely happy with what we did. Proud. I feel very proud of of the school and the students and what we've achieved. And I think we still have lots to go. I still think there's movement, but going back to your original question, for me, the legacy is people. It's not programs. The programs will change. It's not buildings that will change. It's not anything else. The legacy is the people and those connections you make with people. And if we can make each other better, then that's the better legacy, I think, than anything that's physical. Because in that moment, I was taking nothing physical with me. It was, it was about what was that legacy, and I was really quite happy in that moment while floating out in some fairly significant seas that that I'd connected really strongly with people and here at Mabel, and I'm was proud at that moment, and I am proud right now of those connections that I've made with people, and hopefully they're better for that connection with myself.
It's awesome. Wow, what a story. I'm glad you did get back safe. But I remember sitting with you on my last day working at Mabel Park, and you asked me a question. You said, what would I have to do to get your children to attend Mabel Park? And at the time I said, it's nothing about you and it's nothing about the teachers. I'm just not sure I would want to put my kids in this community. Only a year later, my eldest son, because he had watched his mum and dad work at your school and heard the stories of Mabel Park every day at the dinner table, announces to us that in his year 12, his last year, he wants to move to Mabel Park. And we couldn't dissuade him. We couldn't talk him out of it. He had his best year. My second son moved there. Now my third son is starting next year at Mabel Park. And we can't stop singing the praises of Mabel Park. We've got friends who are now moving their children there as well. And I just want to congratulate you, because it really is a testament to what you've always focused on. Two things, I think, is the students. How do I make this school better for students? And how do I create teams where people love to come to work? And, the one thing I miss about Mabel Park was the teams, working with the people there. And I know my wife, who has just finished up at Mabel Park, she just absolutely adores the teams at Mabel Park. And really, that's just a testament to the legacy you've built. So, congratulations on that one. But what I want to know is, how do you build teams of people that actually want to come to work the way that the people at Mabel Park do? I mean, your teachers and your other staff members, they go over and above. They are not there because of a contract. They're there because they really care genuinely about the kids. How do you inspire teams to want to go over and above and just really put in everything they've got into what they do?
Teams, people, again, they're the thing. That's what drives schools. I remember working at a brand new school, and it had the great facilities. It was brand new. It had all the technology you could imagine, but it didn't have the people and the heart. It didn't have that drive where people were so committed. And the opposite is here, I believe, is that we've got the most rundown school in. Well, I should leave that alone, but it's not new. But it's
no, you can go there. It's all right.
Yeah, but the people drive it, and I think it's a number of things. We went above and beyond to make sure that we recruited well. So when you grow, the best thing about growing is you get to add more people and add to the team. So that recruitment phase was really needed. So we did that well. I gave up my time and lectured at UQ, and I didn't get any money for it, but it was about picking out the best fourth year teachers.
Great.
And then the other side of it is looking after people. Now, in government, you can't pay extra. So it's like, okay, so what else do we have to do to look after these people? And I think it's little things like making sure that you connect and get to the staff rooms and how you're traveling, and making sure that I communicate heavily that that I believe that family, my individual family, staff's individual families come first.
Mm.
And I say the statement, and it's a bit, when you go to a cemetery, you do not
Mm.
see on their headstone what job they did.
Mm.
What you see is their family.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it all in life and what really matters, it's family. So what I do is I communicate that a lot to my staff, that that's my priority. I come to work. I love coming to work. I love doing something that is bigger than just, I don't know, I'd hate to sit in an office and count money or,
Mm.
do something like that. I love working with people, but I think it's also communicating that we're real, that you've got to have those things outside of the school that re-energize you, so that when you come into the school, we can give everything and we can go above and beyond. But teams are brilliant at their peak, and they can be, it's hard. And I also I front the conversation as well, Tarun. And I've fronted the conversation around how important teams are through a number of ways. One I think that jumps out for staff is, I showed them the what was it? They were rowing in the Olympic Games, and the young girl, I think it's Sally Robbins, I think, stops and can't row anymore, and they end up finishing. And it was in the media, and they're fighting amongst themselves. And I showed that clip to my staff, and I said, so, have a think about what you're thinking right now. And people said, oh, how dare she, not row. And I said, but hang on, if you're a team member, shouldn't you have identified that she was struggling before the race? And if you're a true team member, if you'd had a conversation with her the night before, or that morning, wouldn't you have checked in on her? And so I think it's about making sure that everyone understands that the team, everyone is critical in that team. And if you've got someone that's struggling, how are you being a good team member and looking after that person that's struggling, so that they don't just cost you the grand final or the gold medal, that they don't just pull up their oar. So it's about making sure I communicate that that you must have a life outside of this work, that I am very family orientated, and if I get a phone call right now in the middle of this interview and there's something wrong, then I'm sorry, Tarun, I'm canning, because that's who I am, and it's making sure that that's communicated to everyone, that they know I'm human, that I'm not a robot. I'm not like one of those CEOs where you don't see behind the scenes, and that I really push how important that team and culture is, that we have nothing if we're not looking after each other. And even if if someone's struggling, instead of talking about why they're struggling, that you're asking if they're okay, and that you're getting to them and finding out how you can help them. So I think it's a lot of communication around me making sure that everyone knows it's really important.
It's great. That's awesome. So you talked about, that personal relationship with staff, and that's really been the foundation of how you've influenced this school so significantly over the last 6 years. As you've grown, you've increased your staff. What are you at now? You've over 400 staff, or?
No, we are staff-wise, I think about 230 staff.
Okay, so it's doubled since you started.
Yep.
You've got extra layers of middle management that never existed before. How do you still maintain that personal touch as a leader when you scale like that? Because it often becomes more difficult for you to get around to everybody personally. And you need to lean on your middle managers more, but yet the staff still expect the boss to come and see them. And so how do you manage that tension?
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's difficult, and it is difficult. I know now there is a definite change in when I first came to the school as the principal to now, because I can't be everything to everyone. I can't be on the phone to every single person that's sick or got a family issue. I make sure, and you've got to give lots of trust to your people, and so that's my immediate executive team and leadership team. So that trust is around and making sure that they know what I stand for, that we look after people, that it's not an organisation where if someone stuffs up, the first question is, why'd you stuff up? The first question is, are you okay? Is everything all right? Let's do that bit first before you get into the performance conversation.
Right.
So it's about, I think, communicating to my immediate leadership team what my values are, making sure that they know ethically what I stand for, that we don't do dodgy stuff. We don't not take a student because we can get away with getting them out the door and not having to take them. They know that I clearly articulate what I stand for and the values, so that they can hopefully, and this is that trust, I suppose those same values to the staff through the whole school. But yes, Tarun, I mean, like, it was interesting in COVID. We couldn't meet face to face with staff meetings, and the one thing that popped up from the team is they came back to me and said, Mick, staff have said everything's all right, everything's going well, but they miss you. So it was interesting to hear that they missed the face to face and me having a conversation with them. And that's where I had to work on how can I do that with technology. I had to make sure I got out more, and I'm also changing how I lead. So handing over projects or some bigger responsibilities to my deputy principals, and giving that trust to them and knowing that they need to drive that so that I can spend more time with people, because I believe that's what it sort of shifted into, where previously, I'd be there leading coaching conversations, that I'd be there. I remember getting here and I was doing timetabling and doing covers, putting a lot of that management aside and making sure that people can get access to me and making sure I'm accessible as much as possible.
Yeah, that's so good.
It has been a big change. It has been something that I've had to continually change my leadership with.
Yeah. So good. I really want to be mindful of your time. You've been so generous talking to us today. And thank you. Just very briefly, as we wrap it up, is there any last thoughts that you want to share, or any topics that really have been burning for you that you think would help any leaders that are listening today?
Look, I think leadership, I love it. It can be really tough. And I've had some really tough moments, and it's all been around looking after people when people aren't going well, whether it's in health and sickness. But I think there's some really benefits to leadership, and it's when you see people succeed. It's those tough battles that you fight, and you're getting people to a point where they're just they're brilliant at their jobs, or they're brilliant in their personal life. And I'd always sort of suggest, if people talk about risk a lot in all leadership realms, the risk in doing something, or what I'd sort of frame is, what's the risk in not doing something? Right. So if you're going to do something in leadership and you think it's a little bit crazy or a little bit innovative or whatever, and someone comes back to you and says, well, it's very risky. The question I like to front back to people is, well, what's the risk in not doing this? And I think as a leader, if you can flip the conversation around that, because we live in an age where it's changed from 5 years ago, from 50 years ago, where we need to be on the front foot always. So I would suggest always think about what's the risk in not doing something, and do it, because what's the worst you're going to lose? Like, as long as you got good people around you, things can go pear-shaped and you can fix it. But always think, have a go,
fantastic,
and take a risk. Yeah,
I love it. Favorite leadership book? Oh,
geez, I've actually got about 4 sitting here now. Leadership on the Line's good. Yep,
Leadership on the Line.
Good. That's a solid one to start off with. It just gives you a really baseline of how you should think about your leadership, and gives you that terminology you can use. So that's a good one.
Great.
Good to Great's another one. Yep.
Okay, Good to Great.
And you finished too, Tarun, and I think leadership, people need to know you do not get good at leadership if you don't read. So and like this, you don't get good about it. And that's something that I'd recommend to all your followers.
Good. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. It's been so valuable. If people want to get in touch with you, Mick, where should they go?
Yeah, look, I've got a LinkedIn account,
Okay.
so I think that's Michael Hornby. I've got a
Okay.
Twitter. I don't usually put heaps on there, but I like to
Yeah.
follow fun and exciting people. So yeah, just at Maple Park State High, everyone's welcome. I love to show people around because
Great.
I'm very proud of it, and I think it's the most diverse school in Australia. And I
Yeah.
really, I think it's a brilliant school, and
Yeah.
I love showing people around because I think it really it changes their mindsets,
Yeah.
and so I'd recommend give us a yell, and I'll come and show you around, and you'll see something that might change what you think about what a traditional school looks like, and particularly a low socioeconomic school. You won't see it. It's just
Yeah.
it's a beautiful school.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to put those links in the description below the video. And I highly recommend Maple Park State High School. Even if you just want to go and have a look, go and drop Mick a line, because it's a great, great school and a great example of amazing leadership. You and your team have done a tremendous job there. Mick, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and look forward to doing it again soon.
You're a good man, Tarun. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value out of that episode. Don't forget to let us know what you thought in the comments, and if you have a topic you'd like us to cover next time, we'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone that would benefit from the content that we produce, please like and share this channel, and we look forward to having you next time on the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel.